The movie starts by introducing Jake Hoyt, a man ready to begin his day as a police officer. He greets his wife, Lisa, and their baby daughter. It's Jake's first day at the Los Angeles Police Department, and he's excited about his recent promotion. He's set to go on patrol with a senior officer from the department. As Jake gets his patrol gear ready, their home phone rings and Lisa answers it. Surprisingly, the caller is the senior officer who will be partnering with Jake, asking him to meet at a cafe before their patrol shift. Once he bid farewell to Lisa, Jake wasted no time in heading to the cafe, following the directions given by his senior colleague. As soon as he arrived, he spotted Detective Senior Alonzo Harris waiting for him. Being a fresh recruit in Alonzo's division, they engaged in a short chat. Soon after, both of them hopped into Alonzo's car to patrol the city. On that day, Alonzo had a number of tasks lined up, with the first one involving surveillance of a group of teenagers who were up to some illegal drug dealings. When Jake noticed that the teenagers had finished their transaction and were about to drive away, he considered reporting it to the police station for assistance. However, Alonzo stopped him, deciding to go after the suspects by himself. Alonzo effortlessly caught up and halted the teenagers' car. Both Jake and Alonzo stepped out of the vehicle, aiming their weapons at the teenagers to prevent any resistance. Alonzo instructed the young teenagers to hand over the illegal drugs they had just purchased and cautioned them against repeating their activities before letting them go. Jake couldn't help but wonder why Alonzo had chosen to release the teenagers without further action. As they continued their journey to their next task, Alonzo turned to Jake and suggested that they try some illegal drugs they had confiscated earlier. Jake immediately declined, pointing out that it went against police rules. However, Alonzo persisted, and they found themselves in a heated argument. Frustrated, Alonzo eventually aimed his gun at Jake, forcing him to comply with the senior detective's demand and take the drugs, which had the unexpected effect of making him feel intoxicated. A little later, Alonzo took Jake to the residence of a retired police officer who had turned into a drug dealer. Upon entering the house, they were greeted by a middle-aged man named Roger, who was a longtime friend of Alonzo. They engaged in a lengthy conversation while enjoying some drinks provided by Roger. After their visit to Roger, Alonzo drove Jake back onto the road. As they were driving, Jake noticed two tough-looking individuals bothering a girl in an alley. He promptly asked Alonzo to stop the car and got out to confront the troublemakers and protect the girl. After successfully dealing with the thugs, Alonzo arrived and began questioning the girl, a student named Eva. She explained that she was the cousin of a notorious gang leader in Los Angeles and warned the thugs that they could face repercussions from her cousin. After hearing Eva's story, Alonzo advised her to go home, and he instructed Jake to leave the place since they had already taught the thugs a lesson. As Jake was leaving the alley, he noticed that Eva had dropped her wallet, so he picked it up. In their next assignment, Alonzo purposely stopped on a street known for illegal drug transactions. He intended to purchase cocaine from a man in a wheelchair named Blue. However, Blue quickly realized that Alonzo was an undercover police officer and hastily swallowed the evidence before attempting to escape. Jake chased after him and eventually apprehended Blue. Alonzo then interrogated Blue, who initially denied being a drug dealer. Alonzo went to great lengths to make Blue regurgitate the swallowed cocaine and questioned him about the drug supplier. Blue eventually confessed that he had obtained the drugs from a man named Sandman. Upon hearing this, Alonzo and Jake quickly set off to locate this individual known as Sandman. While they were on their journey, Alonzo seemed to make some calls to his contacts to find out where Sandman lived. Once he got the information, they headed to a residential area. When they arrived at a house, Alonzo and Jake put on police jackets and conducted a raid on Sandman's residence. Unfortunately, they didn't find the person they were looking for, only Sandman's wife and son. After Alonzo asked them not to resist, he searched Sandman's room for evidence. Sadly, Alonzo didn't discover anything, so he apologized to Sandman's wife and left the house with Jake. As they were about to get into their car, suddenly, Sandman's wife rushed out of the house and shouted for some young men nearby to attack Alonzo and Jake. In that moment, Jake was confused by the situation, not realizing that Alonzo had actually stolen money from Sandman's wife. The young men attacked both Alonzo and Jake. This forced them to quickly jump into their car and leave the area to avoid getting shot at. After escaping the attack, Alonzo drove his car to another neighborhood, which surprisingly turned out to be his own. When they arrived at Alonzo's home, his wife Sarah warmly welcomed her husband and Jake. Inside the house, Jake also met Alonzo's young son, Ethan. Jake quickly formed a bond with Ethan and even dozed off on the couch with the boy. After a while, Alonzo woke Jake up and informed him that they needed to leave immediately for an important meeting with several government officials. Jake swiftly got ready to accompany Alonzo to the meeting. Upon reaching a fancy restaurant, Alonzo introduced Jake to several officials, and then he asked Jake to sit at a different table while he sat with the officials to discuss something. In this meeting, the officials requested Alonzo to put together a team and carry out a secret mission. After the meeting concluded, Jake, who was part of Alonzo's mission, followed the senior detective to the rooftop of the building to wait for the other team members to arrive. After a short wait, 4 men joined Alonzo, and he explained the mission they were about to undertake. Without much delay, they all set off, and when they reached the target's house, they immediately conducted a raid. To their surprise, the target turned out to be Roger, who was known to have a significant retirement fund. The officials who had conspired with Alonzo had previously instructed him to take Roger's retirement funds. Despite being surrounded by armed men, Roger appeared calm when Alonzo asked him about the location of his pension money, and Roger complied without resistance. Not long after, Alonzo and his team accessed the kitchen floor where Roger had kept his money. After obtaining the money they were after, Alonzo divided it among his team, with the rest to be given to the officials who had given him the order. Jake, who also received a share, refused the corrupt money, stating that he would not accept it. Alonzo then asked Jake to sit beside him and forced the police officer to shoot Roger. Once again, Jake refused, and Alonzo shot his friend and made it look like Roger had resisted, ultimately pressuring Jake to shoot the retired police officer. Jake was deeply upset about this, as he believed Alonzo should take responsibility for the shooting. Alonzo, feeling irritated, pointed his weapon at Jake, but Jake managed to wrestle the gun away and threatened to shoot Alonzo. Despite his panic, Alonzo tried to stay calm and asked Jake to follow his plan, as he intended to secure a successful career for him. Upon hearing this, Jake eventually lowered the firearm and left the house after punching one of Alonzo's team members. Shortly after that, an evacuation team arrived at the location of the raid, and Jake began to suspect that Alonzo was a corrupt police officer who frequently engaged in criminal activities. Alonzo tried to convince Jake that unethical practices among police officers to secure promotions were common, but Jake still couldn't believe that Alonzo had shot his friend just to gain favor with police superiors, even though Roger was indeed involved in illegal drug dealing. Later that evening, Alonzo took Jake to a place, and when they arrived in front of a house, they'd both brought a box of money to meet with Smiley, the man who was the gangster boss in the area. After they were allowed inside and handed the box to Smiley, Alonzo excused himself to use the restroom, leaving Jake to join Smiley and some men in a card game. After they finished playing, one of Smiley's henchmen, a bald man, asked Jake to show the gun he was carrying. Without suspicion, Jake immediately removed the bullets from his pistol and showed it to the man. At the same time, Smiley noticed that Alonzo had left in his car, and he informed Jake that the senior detective had left him there deliberately. Jake, realizing the situation, wanted to leave, but Smiley stopped him and revealed that Alonzo was a corrupt cop who had killed a member of the Russian mafia a few months ago. Ever since then, Alonzo had become a target of the Russian mafia, and they had even put a bounty on anyone who could eliminate him. That's why Alonzo was involved in illegal activities to gather money and paid various Russian mafia factions to avoid being hunted down. On that night, Alonzo had to pay $1 million to one of the Russian mafia members to ensure his safety. Jake soon understood that he had been intentionally left behind by Alonzo because the senior detective wanted to get rid of him after discovering the unethical things Alonzo had done. So Jake tried to escape by confronting Smiley and his henchmen, but unfortunately, he was beaten in return. Just as Smiley was about to harm Jake in the bathroom, one of Smiley's henchmen found Eva's wallet, which belonged to Smiley's cousin. When Smiley asked about the wallet, Jake confessed that he had saved her from thugs with bad intentions. To verify this, Smiley contacted Eva, who confirmed Jake's statement. Smiley, grateful that Jake had saved his cousin, decided to let him go. Jake readied his weapon and took a bus to Alonzo's house, determined to confront the senior detective. Upon arriving and seeing Alonzo's son, Jake asked the boy to open the door quietly. He entered the detective's house until he found Alonzo and Sarah counting money in a room. Alonzo was surprised by Jake's unexpected visit and claimed that Jake had passed his training test. However, Jake remained focused on his mission to apprehend the senior detective who had set him up. Alonzo resisted, leading to a firefight between them. As Jake found himself cornered by Alonzo's attack, the detective took the opportunity to escape through a window to the rooftop of the building. Jake immediately chased after him, resulting in a showdown between the two. Unfortunately, Jake was overpowered, and Alonzo planned to escape in his car. Unexpectedly, Jake threw himself onto Alonzo's car, causing Alonzo to drive recklessly in an attempt to shake him off. Jake managed to break the car's windshield and kicked Alonzo, forcing him to stop the car. Jake continued to beat Alonzo until a group of neighborhood men arrived to witness the fight. Alonzo, badly beaten, asked the gang members to shoot Jake, so one of the men placed a gun next to Alonzo. As Alonzo reached for the gun, Jake shot the detective in the leg. Shortly after, another man took the gun and aimed it at Alonzo, instructing Jake to leave the scene. In the last scene of the movie, Alonzo had managed to escape from the gangsters, driving his car on the city streets. When he stopped at a red light, he saw a woman in another car stopping right next to him, which made him uneasy. Soon after, Alonzo's car was surrounded by members of the Russian mafia, who started shooting at him with many shots. Unfortunately, Alonzo lost his life in the attack, and the mafia members left his body behind as they drove away. Moral lesson from the story: do not leave your work partner at the mafia boss's location, especially if they are carrying the wallet of the mafia boss's cousin, or you might end up in a traffic jam with the Russian mafia.